Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you. Her name is Jorie Houlihan, and she's an ADHD life coach, public speaker, and educator who specializes in working with women diagnosed later in life. After living with undiagnosed ADHD until age 49, she brings a deep understanding of the unique challenges, strengths, and perspectives that come with late discovery. She's also the host of a new podcast, ADHD and ... with Jorie Houlihan, where her conversational, heartfelt style blends lived experience with research-backed strategies. Her mission is to help ADHD women feel empowered by their ADHD so they can move from simply getting by to truly thriving. Welcome to the podcast, Jorie. I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's very timely that I ran across you because I recently have had several veterinarians come to me for coaching that have either have ADHD for years or have been newly diagnosed. So it's going to be a great conversation, I'm sure.
Yes, there's a lot of people with ADHD or neurodivergency in general that end up going into veterinarian work. So, yeah.
Right, right. So my first question to all my guests is to tell me their story. So I kind of want to hear where this all started and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So as my interest said, I was diagnosed at the age of 49. But that was not the first time I had tried to talk to a doctor about it. That was 30
Oh,
years after the first time I tried to talk to a doctor about it. And I had always struggled with the obvious things of like focus and that, but it was, I, back then, this was the 80s and the 90s, like it was, oh, she's just dingy or whatever. And I went to the doctor for something unrelated and he said, oh, is there anything else you want to talk about while you're here? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I was probably 19 at the time. And I went to try and tell him what I was experiencing. And it just felt like mush coming out of my mouth. I was like, wow,
could you
I'm
describe it?
literally, yeah, I thought I'm literally the epitome of the ditzy dumb blonde right now. Like I could not get the words out because I was like, how do you explain this to people who don't have it?
Right, right.
And
That don't understand.
yeah. And so his answer was basically, well, you're in college now. Right. And it would come up over the years with different doctors. And it was always sort of, I always got some version of, you just have too much on your plate. But I was like, I really don't. I don't even have as much as some other people in my life. And like, I don't feel like it should be this hard. And the last time I, the last time I talked to a doctor before my diagnosis was, I was 38 and my son was like 9 months old and I knew what he was going to say before he even said it, which was, well, you have a kid now. And I couldn't
It's mom
articulate.
brain or something, right?
Yeah. And I was trying to say like, I'm like, yeah, but I had these issues before I had the kid. They're just like exponentially worse now. Right.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I'm not worried about you. And I'm like, okay. So I thought, well, I guess I just don't adult well. Like I didn't have any other answer. And
Wow.
then I got into my 40s and I really started to get depressed because I was just watching all of these people in my life just flying by me in every area. And I felt like I was just on a hamster wheel, constantly trying to make something work. And this was mostly in my career that I was really like struggling. I have a great husband, I have two great kids, but I'm like, I just always thought I would do so much more with my life, is what I kept hearing myself say. Like, why can't I do the things? Right. And then COVID hit, and like everybody else, all of our worlds converged into one place. Right.
Right.
And my husband, who at that time was really not into social media, ended up on TikTok. And I had been avoiding it like the plague because I'm like, that's the exact kind of thing I would get addicted to. Right.
Right.
But then he's like, oh, you got to watch this video. And so next thing you know, I have it on my phone and I ended up almost immediately in ADHD TikTok. And
Like it knew. TikTok
yeah,
knew.
their algorithm is terrifyingly accurate. Let me tell you.
Yes.
And it wasn't the obvious signs, the forgetfulness and squirrel kind of things, which is what most people think of, right?
Right.
It was anecdotal communication, which is, for example, you come to me and you're talking, you're upset with your husband because of something he did, and I've been through something similar. And so I was like, oh, I've been through something similar. And I start to tell you what my experience was.
Right.
In my brain, I'm trying to connect with you. I'm trying to say, hey, we have this in common. We can talk about it. But
Mm-hmm.
for most people, they just think I'm trying to take over the conversation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have communicated this way my entire life. And also that out of sight, out of mind includes people. And I was like, oh, well, that would explain a lot about certain things in my life. Okay. And I was like, well, I'm not self-diagnosing myself from TikTok videos. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
But it was COVID. So getting in to see anybody was just not happening. And so thankfully there were online companies that were around because I was like, I just want to get this dealt with. And I I I I almost didn't because I was like, I can't bear having one more doctor tell me I'm fine. I know I'm not.
Without even doing any diagnostic testing or
Nothing.
questioning or anything.
No, they'd just be like, if
That's
anything, they'd say, so what are you
frustrating.
noticing? And of course,
Yeah,
my brain would go blank. And I'm like,
sure.
ugh. And
Right.
so, I found a company where this is all they do. And I'm like, well, they're not going to tell me, I'm not going to, assess you. So I went through
Right.
them. And so it was almost anticlimactic because I think I would have been more shocked if they had said I didn't have it.
You already knew.
I knew. But it was a relief initially. It was like, okay, literally my entire life is making sense now, right?
Hmm.
But I also it really what I didn't do medication right away. I thought, no, now that I know what this is, I can totally handle this on my own. I don't need that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's not how it works. And like a lot of people, I don't know why we do this, but we tend to think that once we get the diagnosis, somehow everything will get easier. And I'm like, no, you still have to you got to
The
figure out how
work.
your brain works. Yeah.
Hmm.
So the woman who had actually convinced me to get assessed, she reached out a few months later after my diagnosis and she's like, you haven't started meds yet, have you? I'm like, is it that obvious? And she's like, a little bit. And so she's like, look, I know, but it's not like it was when we were younger and they're very knowledgeable. Like, at least talk to somebody about it. And if it doesn't work, then you'll know. I'm like, all right, fine. So I did. I went on medication and it completely changed my life. I
Yeah.
just was stunned. And, but that was also when I realized that I had been living my life with my hands tied behind my back. I was like, wait, this is what everyone else works with naturally? Like, no wonder I'm so freaking tired. Like, what the hell is this? So I went through an angry phase.
That they should
um,
have caught it sooner and you knew it and you told them, and
yes, and I
that
just
was
thought
where the
how
anger came from.
it was a lot of what might have been, right? What
Mm.
might have been, my
How much
career would have
better
been
my
complete.
life would have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do about it at this point. But the thing that I noticed immediately was that there was not somebody like me now out there for me then. There was nobody coaching women. There was nobody
Okay.
coaching middle-aged women in particular. And I was like, I had a therapist, which was great, but also I later realized didn't really have a recent understanding of ADHD in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so, it was a lot. And I was like, and this is how I tend to, I'm like, well, then I guess I'll do it. That's really what it came down to. And so, that's what I started doing. And I was like, I don't want any other women to go through that. I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel heard. I want them to get skills. I want them to understand that their brain is not broken. It just has a different operating system. And I want them to know what their strengths are. And so it was I was a little nervous about it because I was like, do I really want to be talking about ADHD all the time? But I have it. Both my kids have it. Pretty sure my husband has it. It's all over both sides of our family. So I was like, we're going to be talking about it anyway. So,
Might as well do something with it.
make the world a better place in that respect. I guess that's what I'll do. So,
So, what were some of the signs? Like, let's talk a little bit about, like, you kind of knew you had some signs. If somebody out there is wondering that
mhm.
maybe this could be them, what are some of the signs that you would think that they might notice?
So there is the obvious like forgetfulness, being easily distracted. And everybody kind of knows what that looks like. But it isn't if it happens every once in a while. It's
Right.
if when it happens every day, multiple times a day. If you have, for example, if you put like we put all of our veggies on the center tray of our fridge as opposed to the crisper because it would just go to the crisper to die because I didn't
You
see
never
it.
see it.
And so I didn't think to eat it. And now that it's
Right.
there, I eat way more salads. So out of sight, out of mind is a really big thing that includes people. So if relationships have suddenly just kind of dissipated because you kind of forgot they existed, and it's not because you didn't love them, like my dad would call me and be like, yeah, just call and make sure you're still alive. Haven't heard from you in like a month and a half. And we now realize my dad probably had it, which is why it took him a month and a half to call me. But it was, but if you're in a sales based business, it impacts friendships, it impacts all that. So if that's something that you've noticed, emotional dysregulation is actually a really big part of ADHD. So if you seem to be, if you've ever been told you're too much on a really regular basis, whether it's too sensitive to anything, if you feel like you are always being told that you overreact to things, that can be a sign. It's not always, but that can be a sign. And just if you feel like if you're always starting over,
Mm.
I'll ask you this question. How many planners have you bought this year already? Because that we love a new planner and we'll use it for like a day and a half. And then we
Is it like I'm interested in a new one because it's different? Like what's
not,
the planner thing? I want to understand that because I
yeah.
have
So
the same planner every year and I like it and I keep it. But what is the thought that makes you want to buy another planner?
the novelty, our brain. So we have what's called an interest
Just
based
like
nervous
new
system.
stuff. Yeah.
New stuff. We're convinced that this planner will change our life and
Okay.
or the new pens that we buy to go with it that are color coded pens, that kind of thing. Very
Okay.
we are very creative and it doesn't necessarily mean artistically. I think we are
Sure.
actually really great creative problem solvers. But there is our brain, we have what's called an interest-based nervous system. So the things that get us to do the thing is if we're interested, if it's challenging, if it's urgent, if it's novel. And then the one I add to what to all of that is, and if we have external accountability, people with ADHD have to have external accountability because we are not accountable to ourselves. We'll blow through our own deadlines without even thinking twice about it. But when we have that external accountability, that changes everything.
And I guess I'm just kind of going off on a tangent, but
Mhm.
is there, um, is there a way that you know that? Like, I'm thinking, okay, let's say I have ADHD and I very well may, but how do you know? Like, how did you know? Just because you were so frustrated that things weren't going well, or that you would start things and then stop them and wonder why? Like, what was the like question in your mind? Why isn't this going well?
So when I first brought it up with the doctor back when I was like 19, it was sort of this I I felt like I couldn't keep up because I felt like I was always getting distracted. I would come up with like a million crazy, amazing ideas, but then
Right.
I wouldn't
Couldn't
follow through
follow
on any
through.
of them.
Okay.
And
Makes sense.
like most of us have what I call the hobby graveyard, which is the hobby that we thought we were going to do for the rest of our life, turn it into a career, and that is just now collecting dust somewhere in our house.
Yeah.
Um, but that was sort of the start of it. And I didn't really know, like, I remember when they changed it from ADD to ADHD, and there was something on the news about it, and they were talking about symptoms. And I really resonated with a lot of them, but they kept saying, it was boys, right? They were talking about boys,
Right.
adolescent boys.
Young boys.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, that's not me. So I guess it's not me. And
Right.
so even when when I talked to the doctor, I didn't call it ADHD. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that my friends didn't seem to struggle with it the way I did, or at least I didn't think they did.
Got you. So you weren't looking for specifically that. You were looking for something. There's something going on with me and I need to name it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, as I was getting older, and it was because, executive functioning, like you can kind of in grade school, you can kind of wing it until you get to about middle school. And then your executive functioning skills really have to have to really take hold. And They don't. And our brains, there's a lot of misinformation about ADHD. Most people, it's in the name, so I get it. Like they think it's
Sure.
a deficit of attention, but it's actually
Right.
not. It's actually our brain wants to pay attention to everything
Mm,
because we have low dopamine, right? Our brain doesn't produce enough. And so the the dopamine is what gives you motivation. It also is what gives you a sense of accomplishment. We don't have a real natural sense of accomplishment. We're usually just relieved it's over. And then that dopamine is converted into norepinephrine, which is what fires the frontal lobe. Well, the
hmm
frontal lobe is where a lot of your executive functioning is held. So that's the first part of it. But the other part of it is it also works as a filter. So the 99% of things we don't need to know on a conscious level, your frontal lobe, if it's working properly, will take that, throw it in your subconscious. So only the really important stuff gets through. And the rest of the brain goes, oh, that got through. It must be important. We need to pay attention to it.
Right.
Well, if you don't have enough dopamine, right, then you're not going to have enough to really have that frontal lobe firing the way it should. So, way more information gets through, which is one of the reasons why we are so easily distracted. Because our brain, it's a self regulation issue. We can't always regulate where the attention goes, we can't always regulate the emotions. And so, but when I would say, well, when my son was diagnosed, I was looking at him and going, well, that's not me. I'm not like that. Because he's exactly what people think of when they think of that, right? He's very
Right.
outward and disruptive and whatever. I didn't realize that hyperactivity can also be what's going on in your head. And I have
Mm.
like a never ending dumpster fire of things going on up there. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. That was something I learned on TikTok.
So
And that's when,
sometimes it's in, sometimes it's more obvious out, but it's always that disruption of all of the thoughts and things that
yeah,
are going on that you just can't quite work out how
yeah.
to.
And what the other thing that's confusing about it is that we also have something called hyperfocus, where we can focus nonstop for like 6 hours straight on something if we're interested in it. We'll
Gotcha.
know every detail about it.
Right.
And so it's confusing to people who have ADHD. They're like, well, I can't have that because I do that. So how could I have ADHD? Right. And with girls and women, our symptoms tend to be more subtle. Most girls and women tend to be diagnosed with the inattentive presentation. I was diagnosed with combined presentation. So I have enough markers from both the hyperactivity and the inattentive because, go big or go home. But
You might as
it,
well have it all.
yeah, you know, but those symptoms are more subtle. And so when you have if you are a girl and, you have a messy desk, messy locker, messy room, right? Those are all signs of at least struggles with executive functioning, but it's also overwhelm. They get to a point where they're like, I can't bring myself to clean this because there's so much I have to do. And
Right.
overwhelm is a signature part of ADHD. So girls tend to slip through the cracks a lot. And that's one of the reasons I talk about it so much is because teachers, they're doing their best, most of them, but they're still looking for boy symptoms in girls and they
Right.
just don't present the same
It's
way.
not the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like from your perspective to have something like this, have it then diagnosed, and then trying to figure out, okay, now what do I do? Medication, techniques. Like, how does that feel as a human to be, okay, now I have this label, which is good because you're figuring it out, but then what's the next? What comes with that?
That's a really great question because I really feel it's different for everybody.
Hmm,
Mine was initially, like I said, I don't need medication because I can figure this out on my own.
I'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And people with ADHD are historically really bad at asking for help, largely because we're worried that people will think we're either A, lazy, or B, incompetent.
Hmm,
And so we don't ask for help. Um, but I also, while the medication was a game changer for me, I also believe that pills don't teach skills. Regardless of medication status, you have to learn how your brain works. That's where I come in because
love
I
that.
help you figure out, well, what does your ADHD look like? Because it's a spectrum. And
Right.
so for some people,
Just like every other human, right? Our brains are all unique.
yes. And
Mm,
so your challenges, we may have similar challenges, but how it shows up for you may be different. How it impacts your particular career, for example, may be different. But if you don't even realize as part of your ADHD and you're still trying to fix it the neurotypical way, you're
Right.
just going to be beating your head against a wall. And so one of the big reasons I felt relief when I was diagnosed was, oh, good, I don't have to keep taking all these personal development courses anymore because they don't work for my brain. Because I was like, I don't even want to think about how much time and money I've spent on those things. And it's not that they aren't valuable, but if they don't work for your brain, then, and so there's some things that I've learned where I'm like, okay, that part doesn't work for my brain, but if I tweak it a certain way, this may help. Right. And so I can't tell you the difference it makes when you understand how your brain works. And that doesn't mean that that I don't struggle still, because it's a
Sure.
daily thing.
Right.
And I have to be on it, but it is so much harder when you don't understand that part of it. And you just think, oh, well, I'll wing it or whatever. It's so much better to know what you're dealing with.
So tell me how the medication helps with ADHD, just generally. Like I don't need like chemical, but
Yeah.
just kind of the idea, like why medication and why does it help?
So most people who have ADHD are put on a stimulant medication. And that is because it increases the dopamine levels in the brain
Okay.
because we have a deficit.
Right.
So there are some people that will say, "Oh, when I started medication, my brain got so quiet." I have not had that experience. What I usually tell people is, without medication, my brain is like dumpster fire anarchy. I'm just running around putting out fires that I'm sure I probably set. But with medication, it's more like a well-run three-ring circus. So there's still a
Okay.
lot going on up there, but
Right.
I don't feel overwhelmed by it. And some of it is even entertaining.
Okay.
So it's just I just have a better level of focus. So I can actually initiate tasks much easier than I used to be able to.
Okay.
And I can stay on task easier than I used to. But then you have the little sub loop of menopause and perimenopause. So there's a lot of people when they start going into perimenopause and menopause that start to think they have ADHD. But if you've always been fine with especially your executive functioning and all that stuff prior to that age, it's probably perimenopause or
Yeah.
menopause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if you've been like this your entire life and it's just gotten significantly worse when you get to that age, then it's probably ADHD. But estrogen is directly tied to dopamine levels. So when your estrogen tanks, so does your dopamine.
Right. Which
And
makes total sense.
yeah. And so that just adds a whole other layer of things into that. And I work with so many women right now that are like at that age where they're like, what is this? It's so much worse. So yeah.
Yeah. Being a woman is such a blessing, right? Guys don't have to deal with it, most of the things. No.
Men go through andropause and their dopamine is connected to their testosterone. I actually researched this because I did a talk with my networking group. Somebody's like, can you talk about how this is hormones impact this? I'm like, yeah. And
Right.
so for women who still have a cycle and are on medication, very often the week before their cycle starts, they will feel like they didn't take their meds. They'll be like, did I take my meds today?
Okay.
So it's for the same reason. The estrogen is
Yeah.
at its lowest point. And so, yeah.
Okay. So then how did you deal with I don't know what the right word is, stigma? Is that like, do people feel ashamed or worried about judgment or when they get this diagnosis? Like, is it something that you were kind of thinking I should hide? Or did you just come out of the gate like, I'm going to talk about this. This is important.
I don't think I came out of the gate thinking that. I wasn't hiding it, but I also wasn't like, I'm going to announce it to
Wanting it.
everybody. I think I
Okay.
was just trying to figure it out because in the
Yeah.
beginning, it was really overwhelming because now I knew what it was. And so I was like, well, now I have to act like I have it together because now I don't have an excuse because I know what it is. But that was also when I was still not medicated or any of that stuff. And so, but then when I started the medication and I started to get more focused and I started to like accomplish some things, that changed things. But there are a lot of people who they won't talk about it because they don't want to be seen as less than.
Right.
They won't like, so ADHD is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you can ask for reasonable accommodations.
Okay.
And I don't know anyone of my clients or anyone I've really ever spoken to who has felt comfortable telling HR that they have ADHD or asking for those. I had one woman who did.
Right.
Um, and because again, they have that fear that they're going to be labeled as lazy or incompetent. And there's still a lot of people who don't think it's a real thing. They think it's just entitlement or laziness. And it's like, we are some of the hardest working people you will ever meet in your entire life because we're working so hard to keep up with you while working from a deficit of what you have. And
Yeah.
so it's just really, it's a very strong feeling for that. But one of the other reasons I do talk about it a lot and I do what I do is because I want to normalize it. I want to normalize the conversation because a lot of parents hesitate to get their kids diagnosed because of, as you put, the label, right?
Right. They don't
And
want
I
their kid labeled as having something.
and I'm like, well, your kid's getting a label, getting lots of labels.
Right.
You're not liking those labels,
Not good
right?
ones. Yeah.
And so it's better that you know what you're dealing with. And by the way, like every kid's got something. Like, it's
I think I would say every human has something.
yeah, every
You know,
human's got
like we
yeah.
all have anxiety or depression or like it's pretty common that all of us are struggling with something.
Yeah. And so the fear of the label, I think especially for a lot of us that are like Gen X, right? And it was like back then, oh, you have a chemical imbalance. And it was like it was a way to make fun of people, right?
Right.
And so that's what we worry about.
Sure.
And so I'm like, yeah, you just need to like leave that alone. That was back then. You're doing your kid or yourself a disservice by not getting this figured
By
out now.
denying that this exists.
Yes, because the other part of this is because when the brain is low on dopamine, it's always looking for dopamine. And as a result, what ends up happening is that people will be addiction is much
What I
higher
was
in our
gonna say,
community.
yeah, I bet there's higher addiction rates.
And we die on average 13 years earlier than our neurotypical peers, either
Really?
because of either like making impulsive choices that were not wise. It
Right.
can also be, with emotional dysregulation. Sometimes in the spur of a moment, somebody makes a bad choice and hurts himself.
Yep.
Sometimes it is because we actually also can struggle with self care. Taking showers sometimes even is hard because it's a lot of executive functioning, making those doctor's appointments, those kind of things. So then they wait too long. And then
Right.
if they have something that's going on, it may be too late. So it's so important to get the diagnosis because you're helping to prevent a lot of that if they know what they're dealing with and they're given the right tools for it.
Right.
And if I could go back to one other thing, as far as the medication, there are some people who are on non-stimulants. Those are things like a lot of people use like Strattera or Wellbutrin. Those are a lot of times like antidepressants or anti-anxiety kind of medications. And it can be really helpful for those too. So as I mentioned, stimulants create more dopamine in the brain, whereas the non-stimulants help the norepinephrine that dopamine converts into last longer.
Okay.
So
So it's a
there's,
different mechanism.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So tell me about the mom part of it because now you're diagnosed and were you diagnosed before your kids got diagnosed?
no. I
So
was
your
diagnosed
kids
with
were first.
my son was first, then me, then my daughter.
Okay. So tell me about that. Like how does a mom dealing with this cope and then how do you cope with the diagnosis in your kids?
That's a really good question. So, you know, it's challenging when your kids are struggling, right? And my,
Oh, yeah, that's the worst. Like it's the worst pain that a mother has is when
yeah.
the kid's struggling or suffering.
And they say that like a mom is only as happy as their least happy child, right?
Truth. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my son is also on the spectrum. And so that had always been the focus was, that. And then when we started to get calls about what they were calling energy issues in
Mhm.
third grade, I was like, wow, they were so diplomatic. Um, we were kind of in denial about it. And then in fourth grade, they finally were like, we have to have a conversation about this. This is what he's presenting with, but it's a medical diagnosis. So we said, okay, so we got him assessed, and it was very obviously ADHD. Um, I was diagnosed 4 years later. And then when I was diagnosed, that's when I really started to see it in my daughter because now I was learning about it and I was like, okay, this is what's going on with her. And
Okay.
so we have three people in my house and we all look completely different from each other in terms of what ours looks like.
Okay.
So,
Externally, like how you're dealing with it and it
and
expresses
just,
itself.
yeah, exactly. And so the struggle is like, so if you're a mom who has ADHD and you don't know it, right, you're going to struggle with a lot of emotional dysregulation. And I say this all the time. I wish I'd been diagnosed sooner, not even so much for myself, but for my kids, because I
Mm,
yelled a lot when they were young.
yeah.
And that I can't
Can't take it back.
can't
Yeah.
take it back, right? But once I started to learn all this and learned about the emotional dysregulation, what was happening, and I realized, oh my gosh, that's what it was. Because I just thought it was just a shitty person, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so I had conversations with each of my kids individually. And I said, look, this is what I've learned. And I apologized. Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. I get it. It's emotional.
And so I apologized and I said, I'm a work in progress. It's not like suddenly this has gone away, but I better understand it now. And so now, more often than not, if I'm like losing it with them, it's because I've asked them to do something 18 times and they haven't listened to me. So like
Yeah.
it's more,
It's different than it used to be.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's frustrating too, though, with them because like, they both have their own individual struggles with it and trying to manage each of them while also trying to manage my own. A
Right.
lot of times, and ADHD is incredibly heritable. If one parent has it, almost always at least one of the kids has it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. Hmm.
Yeah. And so if you have it, more than likely you had a fairly unstructured childhood because structure is really hard for us. I
Sure.
actually had the opposite of that actually because my dad was a Marine. And
Hmm.
so it was very
Very
structured.
structured.
But then all three kids, me, my brother and sister, my brother's been diagnosed as well. My sister's pretty sure she has it. We all like just rebelled in the other direction as soon as we like moved out on our own. And, but same thing. I couldn't understand why can't I just keep my room clean? Why can't I do these things? Right.
Yeah.
And they say that kids with untreated or undertreated ADHD hear on average 20,000 more negative comments than their neurotypical peers by the age of 12.
Well, and
And
that just destroys everything, all your
and
self-confidence. Yeah,
and
that's
it's not always
terrible.
like abusive. Sometimes it's like sit still.
Sure.
Why can't you just do this like your brother? Right?
Right.
How
Yeah.
could you forget that?
Right.
That kind of thing. And I mean, I know what it is. And I find myself saying that sometimes. And I'm like, what am I doing? I know what this is. Right.
Right.
But it just comes out. And so, it definitely has an impact on their confidence. But again, that's why it is so important to get them diagnosed as early as possible, because even if you don't have it as a parent, you need to learn about it and you need to
Right.
figure out what it looks like.
Understand it.
You can't be calling your kid lazy when it's
Right.
executive dysfunction. I mean,
Sure.
sometimes it's lazy. Everybody has moments where they're lazy,
Of
but
course.
for a lot of these kids, they are doing everything they can because kids want to please their parents,
Mhm.
and so they're not doing it on purpose. They're doing the best they can, and it may not be what you want it to be, but you got to work with where they are, not where you want them to be. And it's hard. And as a parent with it, and having two kids, I still struggle with that with them sometimes. I have to really rein myself in and go, okay, wait, what are we doing here? But now that's one of the areas where the medication really helps because I'm present enough most of the time now to go, okay, something I need to chill out here, whereas
Right.
before I would have just not. So
Yeah. It's like beating somebody up for something they can't help. And that just doesn't work. It ruins self-esteem, and you could see why then the suicide rate might be higher in people with ADHD,
yep.
the depression, anxiety, the whole nine yards. It probably amplifies all that.
Well, and women very often are diagnosed with anxiety and or depression first.
Hmm,
And very often those are actually side effects of untreated ADHD,
that makes sense.
but they can be their own thing. So I'm always like, just get an assessment. I say that like
Right.
it's so easy to do. It can be
Sure.
cost prohibitive for some people, unfortunately, but it you want to know what you're dealing with again. So like if it is
Right.
its own beast, you need to know that too, but it can
Sure.
also be part of it, the ADHD as well. So the more you know, it just it gives you so many more tools to work with so that you can really start to function in a way where you feel like you're human and you're not broken.
Right.
And so many women, by the time they get to me, they just feel completely broken. And I'm like, you're not, I promise you're not. But
Right. You just have to put it back together once you figure this out.
yeah,
Yeah. So tell me, you told me before we started on the podcast that we didn't want to forget to talk about strengths.
yes.
So tell me about that because there's probably some superpower hidden in the ADHD brain, I'm guessing.
Yes. So when you start to really understand what your brain does, right? When you understand what your ADHD looks
That's
like,
powerful. Yeah.
that in and of itself is powerful. Hyper focus, which I talked about, where we can, we can focus. If
Right.
if you don't if you don't understand how it works, it can be absolutely not a superpower. You will miss meetings, you will miss job interviews, you'll miss things
Right.
because you'll just be fixated. But if you start to recognize, our energy is different for people with ADHD, because it takes so much more to get us out of inertia, and so our energy is just different. And so one of the things I do with my clients is I'm like, I want you to start paying attention to when is your energy best, when is your focus best. They usually are aligned,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the time that you want to focus on more detail oriented things, right? Where you do have to be more present to focus on the details.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe at a different time where maybe you're not as, focused, maybe that's where you can do things like maybe return some emails or, things like that. Take a nap. I don't care. But um, but when they can figure out when they're like, for me in the morning is my best time. And that's when my hyper focus also will kick in a way that's really good. I get a lot of things done. I have to teach people how to take breaks. We're, it sounds like a weird thing to say, but
Right.
we're afraid to take breaks because I'm motivated now. What if I take a break? And
Like I'm going to lose it. If I
yeah.
don't do it now, I'm going to lose it.
And the reason for that is in the past, they'd be in hyper focus for like 3 hours. And I'd say, okay, so during that 3 hours, did you hydrate? Did you nourish yourself? Did you get any movement? How long had you been holding your bladder? And they're like, were you there? Wow, what is this? And I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. So by the time you finally took a break, your brain's like, great, we're done.
Right.
But if you take very structured breaks, and I have rules for the breaks, then you are much more likely to go back and get back into hyper focus and get your stuff done.
And not
So,
lose it totally.
and not
Because
lose it totally.
otherwise you just lose it. Like I was focused and now it's gone.
And what I point out is that the longer you work without the break, the worse your work gets. And so, but when
Sure.
you take breaks and you get some water, go to the bathroom, walk around for a little bit, whatever, you come back feeling refreshed. You have to know exactly what you are coming back to do before you leave. So, like if I'm at my desk and I'm editing a podcast video, for example, I can't just say, well, I'm going to come back and get back to work. No, I have to know exactly what I'm doing. And I have to put it out like a note on my screen because
Right.
I might
This is where you
forget.
left off.
Yeah. And the other big rule is like no sitting. Like if you sit on a comfy chair, you're done. Right. It just does. It's so much harder to get moving again. So
Okay.
if you can sit on like a fairly uncomfortable dining room chair to eat something, that's fine.
Right.
But like, don't sit on a comfy couch and start doom scrolling on your phone because you're
Because then you're just getting that dopamine from the doom scrolling.
you're toast. You're not gonna go back.
And it turns into an addiction.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, in terms of other strengths, we are creative problem solvers. We
Mm,
tend to be out of the box thinkers.
yes.
And so we also are really great at pattern recognition. So I say one of our secret powers is that we can like we know what the end of a movie is going to be very often before everybody else does. Um, so sorry, my nose is itchy here.
That's okay.
Um, but when so we see where there are gaps in things. Very
Okay.
People with ADHD the last time I heard was 5 times more likely to be entrepreneurs. And part of it is because we're
That's
out of the box
interesting.
thinkers and we
Yeah.
don't always do well in corporate settings.
Because there's too much structure.
Well, no, we actually need the structure, but
Oh, okay.
we don't love the structure. We don't sometimes it's just because we're out of the box thinkers, not everybody in corporate America appreciates that. So,
Sure. Yeah. So you're
and so,
more likely to probably lose your job or
well, and also if you are late all the time because people with ADHD have something called time blindness, that's the other big sign.
yeah, I
If
had an employee like that once and I couldn't figure it out. Why can't she just get to work on time?
so, we don't feel time passing, at least not the way that neurotypical people do. It moves much slower for us,
Okay.
and we we struggle to estimate how long things will take. So we tend to always underestimate how long it will take to do
Okay.
something unless it is a non-preferred task. then we tend to overestimate how long it will
Okay.
take. But if you think, oh, I have to be at work in 10 minutes. Oh, it only takes me like 5 minutes to get there. Well, they're not factoring in that they got to go get the snow off their car and they have to
Right.
find parking and then they
Yeah.
have to, there's all that kind of stuff too that doesn't get factored into that. So we work on that too. But, um, uh, so yes, people then sometimes lose jobs because of that. Uh, but what's great is that they also see gaps where like if you're an employer, right? And one of your staff members ADHD, they probably see where you have gaps in your business where like things could be more streamlined.
Okay.
Um and they usually will have pretty creative ways of fixing that too sometimes because they just see things differently. I
Right.
how I describe ADHD brains is this: while the rest of the world was born with a PC brain, we were born with Macs. But the
Mm.
Mac brain isn't the problem. The problem is that we were given the PC manual to work with.
Okay.
Okay. So, but once you start to really understand what how your brain works, then you're making your own manual and it works way better. But I feel like employers really do themselves a disservice by not embracing ADHD staff better because I know we get really fixated with they're always late and things like that. And if you're there to open the shop, then yeah, that's a problem. That's probably not the
It's
right
the
job for
wrong
you.
place for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But if it's not part of it's not like a job requirement per se, and you do really good work, who cares, right? Like
Right.
that's how I see it. But we are really great storytellers. We are really empathetic. We're very good at seeing other people's perspectives in a way that I feel like other people don't. We're very persistent. Like when we feel like, okay, I know an issue here and I know I can fix this, and we will keep working on it
Digging
until we find it.
the answer.
Um, and even though we have sometimes a label of not being very smart and blah blah blah, there are a lot of gifted geniuses out there who have ADHD. So I think most people with ADHD are actually very intelligent. They just, because they don't understand how their brain works. Like when I was in school, I so remember how I talked about how our frontal lobe can't filter out certain things, or
Yes.
like it's too much gets through.
Sure.
If I was going into say a math test and I didn't feel confident about it, I could not hear the clock ticking. And it was such a distraction.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
would absolutely impact how I tested on a test that I was already nervous about. Right.
Right.
And so, it's things like that. So people tend to think they're not very smart when they really are. They just need to figure out where their strengths are. And again, when they find the thing they're really interested in, they're going to know everything about it. They're going to know it backwards and forwards. And they're going to be able to do such amazing things with it. I can't even tell you. And so that is, for a lot of people, school is hard because it's not what they're interested in. They don't want to do those studying. It's not,
Well, and it's not, school isn't designed to be individualistic, if that's
no,
like
it's
they
not.
don't treat each kid as an individual. It's kind of like they try to push everyone into the same mold and it just doesn't work.
It's very much a one size fits all. If
Hmm.
you're fortunate enough to be in a good school district, you are going to have teachers that do pay more attention than others, and we've been pretty fortunate with a lot of that. But at the same time, and I talk about this a lot, I really wish that we had a school system where, first of all, there was more than one teacher in the room, and two, where the teachers could say, okay, for my kinesthetic learners, you're going to do this. For my visual learners, you're going to do this. For my audio learners, you're going to do this. So these kids can learn the way they learn, not the way
Sure.
you teach.
Right.
And it's just not how it is. And I it's a pipe dream, at this point, but it would be really nice because I think we would be so much farther along as a society.
Yeah, for sure.
you know
So when you're coaching people, you're coaching clients that I'm guessing most of them have already been diagnosed when they come to
Mo-
you, or do some people say, I think I have ADHD, I want to talk to someone who might know? Like how do you
so they don't have to have an official diagnosis. Some people don't want to get the diagnosis. They don't want to do
they just
medication, and
suspect
they
that that's what's going on?
yeah, and they clearly have some challenges going
Something.
on that I can
Right.
help with.
Right.
Most of my clients, though, do have a diagnosis. A lot of them maybe got their diagnosis a long time ago, but they didn't really come to accept it until later in life. And so they're still struggling as much as they were when they were 20, when they were
Right.
diagnosed, if not more.
Right.
And so they, it's a big deal to learn this about yourself when you are older.
Sure.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And
It's probably overwhelming in and of itself to learn something like that.
yeah, it
And
is.
know that maybe it could have been different when you were younger had you had somebody figure that out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I come from a no judgment perspective and I come from a curiosity perspective.
Right.
So when people come to see me, I am very clear there's no judgment here because if you're afraid to tell me things, I can't help you.
Right.
Right.
It's not going to work. Yeah, that relationship with your coach is can be kind of intimate from that standpoint.
Yeah.
You talk
And
about some things that maybe not you don't talk with other people about.
exactly.
Hmm.
And I'm like, and I've probably been there myself. Right. And that's
Right.
one of the reasons I think my clients like me so much is because they know I've been there. Right.
Sure.
I
Right.
get it.
Yeah.
Um, and but I also to get them out of the judgment zone that they're in, because we are our own worst bullies. I'm
For
like, I
sure.
want you to look at everything through a lens of curiosity. Think of it like a science experiment,
Yeah.
right? So if you're feeling resistance to doing a task, right? Just notice, oh, I'm feeling resistance. I wonder what's going on, right?
Right.
And ask yourself some questions. Does this feel too big? Does it feel like it's going to take too much time? Maybe there's some vagueness around it because our brains do not do well with vagueness. Maybe you just need some clarification, right? Or maybe it's just boring and there's no dopamine in it, which for us is a very real struggle.
Right.
And when you start asking questions out of curiosity and you leave the judgment at the door, judgment just brings more judgment, but curiosity brings answers. And so I'm always like, if you didn't do your homework, don't not show up for our session because there's something there that I need to know about so I can help
Right.
you. Right. So I'm not going to judge you for it. You're not the first person to show up and say, I didn't do my homework.
Right.
But, it's about just taking the edge off of it a little bit. You know what I mean? Because they're
Yeah.
so down on themselves when they come to see me. And I
Yeah.
really put this out now because I want people to start seeing me before they get to that place where they can
Sure.
start to learn the skills, where they can start to understand their brain before they feel like they're hitting rock bottom with it. But when they do, if they are in that place, whatever it is, it's still the curiosity part is I think it's crucial to success with it because
Right.
otherwise you're just going to be beating yourself up and you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and that's true with any coaching of
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah,
is
I
just
agree.
being open to why is this happening? I need to understand it because you really need to understand your own brain before you can do anything for it, no matter what the problem is.
And I can't tell you how many clients I've had when we are first working together and they're telling me things that I know they've never told anybody else about the things
Right.
they struggle with.
Sure.
And they're like, do you know how refreshing it is to talk about this and not feel judged?
Right.
And that just means everything to me because that's what I want. I want them to feel like they can talk about it and
Sure.
normalize that this is just
Right.
part of who you are and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's why you're doing this podcast and we talk about things like this as coaches is to just make it okay
Mm-hmm.
that you want to do better and have better and feel better and love your life more. That's why
Yeah.
you need to have somebody help you work through it.
I mean, the thing I want more than anything is to help empower as many women with ADHD as possible. Because I think when I think about how much potential has been left on the table because of girls getting missed,
Sure.
it breaks my heart
Yeah.
because we need this, right? We need more female voices in general. But when I think about how creative we are, how we have a lot of ingenuity, how we're great at problem solving, so many things could be different if we quit worrying about the labels, if we got
Right.
people the help that they needed
Right.
and stopped judging people
Yeah.
so much.
And then actually learn some tools to not only understand your brain better, but actually work with it rather
Yes.
than against it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
So, when I start working with clients, I'm like, there is no one size fits all with this. A lot of it is throwing what things to the wall and seeing what sticks. And with
Right.
ADHD, because we need the novelty, I'm like, okay, this is going to work until it stops. And then
Right.
we need a backup plan. And
Right.
you may eventually come back to this because it'll be
Sure.
novel again.
Right.
No, but,
Kind of
and they
like
all,
changing the planners, right?
yeah, exactly. But they know what I'm talking about when I say that. They're like, you really
Sure.
do get this, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I do. Um, but when they really start to embrace it, I have a client who she was diagnosed in her 60s. She wasn't even looking for a diagnosis. She was diagnosed with that and autism. So she's ADHD.
Wow.
And she really struggled with um, her emotional dysregulation. And there's something called RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria. So what happens is that sometimes even the perception of a slight or criticism will send you reeling, where you think the whole world hates me. And
Right.
it can be really serious. And she really, really struggled with that. And so I'm not a therapist, so I can't treat that kind of thing per se.
Sure.
But I'm like, but I can help you start to recognize situations where that tends to show up, right? How can we maybe anticipate that a little more? Then what kind of things can you put in place so
Mhm.
that you can maybe even keep it from happening? What
Right.
can you do to help calm your central nervous system when you are spiraling, right? How can you
Mhm.
catch yourself? That kind of stuff. And the difference in her in the last year and a half that I've been working with her is unbelievable, because
Right.
she's like, I brought my toolbox and I knew what I was walking
She's learned
into.
what tools she needs.
Yeah. And when she's really struggling, she knows she needs to like walk away
Right.
and, take a break, whatever it is. Like, she understands what she needs to do in a way that she couldn't before.
Right.
And so, and it makes a big difference then in your relationships with people when you better understand that component of it, because the emotional dysregulation, people tend to underestimate how much it impacts things, but it is very, it's a pretty big part of it. So
Well, I could see where it would be very off-putting to other people if there's someone that can't manage their emotions to the point of getting angry or screaming or whatever. And that's going to damage a lot of relationships before you even know that you're struggling with this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, we also, I say that people are we have a lot of contradiction. So we are some of the most optimistic people you will ever meet. Like I said, we are always convinced that that
Fun.
planner is going to be the planner that changes our
Right.
life. And we also catastrophize everything.
Mm,
So it's like, what am I missing? When's the other shoe going to drop?
right.
And so it's a very weird kind of dichotomy that we're
Yeah.
always like, living in. And we are we tend to overshare sometimes, and that can be off-putting to people too, because you're like, why are you telling me your whole life story? And but
Right.
what's funny is that when I meet somebody and I could tell they probably have ADHD because they're already oversharing with me,
Right.
it's like info dump, we're best friends, yay, it's like
Right.
great.
Because you understand them.
Yeah, yeah. So
So, what did I not ask that I should have before we start to wrap this podcast up? This has been really interesting because I coach veterinarians and I know some of them that struggle with this and talk about it um and it makes sense because you said that they're very great problem solvers and they can really dig into and that makes sense that why veterinarians would be attracted to this profession.
yeah, I told you before we started that a very good friend of mine, her daughter has it and was kind of struggling. She was in college and she hers is pretty severe.
Right.
And she ended up, I think, getting an internship on, working with a vet clinic and just
Right.
fell in love with it. And she's now going to vet school. And she's not the first person I've heard of that with ADHD or some kind of neurodivergency where this
Right.
is where they've ended up. And I think there's something just about animals in general
Yes.
that we just connect with in a way that,
Understand. Yeah.
yeah. The only other thing I would say, especially because of who you work with, is kind of touching back on the time management stuff. Um, you know, understanding it's not even just the time management stuff. Understanding what your strengths are is really important, and also understanding where your challenges are, right?
Always.
And
Yeah.
learning how to ask for help when you are struggling with those things. like I said, we are terrible about asking for help because of a lot of those fears that come up of, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid. Oh, that,
Right.
they maybe have asked for help on something in the past and somebody's like, why do you need help with that? That's so easy. Right. Well, it might be easy for them, but it's a struggle for us. But we
Right.
also have things that are easy for us that they don't, that
Sure.
they can't do. Um, but I just want to say, like, you're not alone, first of all. And, and I know you are amazing. And even if you aren't feeling that right now, just know that I have met, and I'm sure you have too, met so many people who they're so down on themselves. But when they really start to see where they shine, where they thrive, and they learn to
Mhm.
lean into that, changes everything. So
Right.
just don't ever give up on yourself. Like, keep working, you'll figure it out. But the best thing to do is learn how your brain works. Like I said, I would say that to really anybody, but definitely for people with ADHD.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell people where they can find you if they want to learn more, if they want coaching from you. Tell them and about your podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I do private coaching. Go to joriehoulihan.com for information on that. I also have a premium coaching thing, which is a lot more hand holding, much more access to me, called the Clarity and Action Intensive. And that is a 12-week thing that I'm actually just launching.
Okay.
And then I have my podcast, which is ADHD and dot 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 with Jorie
Dot, dot,
Houlihan.
dot.
So that is sometimes there's solo episodes with just me talking about some aspect of ADHD, and then sometimes they're interviews. I try to keep them short. The interviews always have to go long because there's just always so much good stuff.
Takes longer. Yeah. It's more
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. But I do try to remember who my audience is. I'm like, you can always hit it up to the speed. Um, so you can, and that's yeah. So you can go to the ADHD and podcast.com, and you can find me there. And I'm on all the podcast things. So
Social
if
media stuff, all the
and
podcasting sites.
yeah, so Spotify, RSS, all that stuff, and then I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the whole shebang. And most of the things I'm under Jorie Houlihan. So,
Well, I love that. This has been a fascinating conversation.
well, thanks for having me.
Definitely have enjoyed it. I've learned some things that I didn't formerly know, and I'm sure we could learn more about this.
There is so I could literally talk for hours about this stuff, and
Yeah.
I love talking about it. But yeah, there's a lot to it. It's a lot more than just losing things and getting easily distracted.
Right.
But it's not all lost. Like I said, when you start to figure it out, your brain out, things really start to turn around.
Well, and I think that's true of anyone. If you're thinking you're not enough or there's something wrong with you or you're depressed or you're whatever, if you have negative thoughts about yourself, that's the time to stop and find somebody to help you because none of us are mistakes, none of us are problems. Like we're all on this earth for a reason. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And I think the work comes in when you're getting coached and you're trying to figure this stuff out. The work comes into getting to that gold in you. Like there's
Yes.
gold in all of us and sometimes it's a little harder to dig out, but it's always there. And I just want people to know that. I want people to just love themselves enough
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
continue to work on themselves.
I
It's
completely
important.
agree. I think we all bring something to the table. You just have to figure out what yours is, and it's in there, so
Sure.
just keep looking.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Jory. It's been a lot of fun. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please let me know. I'm sure she would be happy to come back if we have more things to talk about.
Of
But
course.
I really appreciate the work you're doing. It's very important.
Thank you very much. And as a fellow coach, I love talking with other coaches
Coaching
because
is the best, isn't it?
I love it. I love it so
I
much.
love getting coached. And I think that was one of the reasons that I became a coach because I was like, this is like magic. If
Yeah.
someone can coach you and help you figure yourself out, it really does. It changes your life.
And it's nice to know that you have somebody in your corner, right? Like we're always like I'm always like, if you are having a day, text
You're
me.
the
I will be your
you're the
biggest
cheerleader,
cheerleader. Yeah.
right? Yeah, which is
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being here today, Jorie. And everybody, as always, have a beautiful week. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Jorie.
Bye.